I'm testing the new Audi Q7. It might be a facelift, but there's a lot more technology and the design is also quite different. And we'll take a quick look at this and drive this as well. So let's find out what this SUV is all about. Are you ready? Come on, let's go. The new Q7 really hasn't changed much in terms of size because it's on the same platform as before. So it is still 1.97 meters wide and about 5.06 meters long. But what is different, of course, you'll immediately notice up front is the design. You get LED lights as standard now, and you can also get the matrix LED as an option and the laser light as an option like we have here, denoted by that really angular arrow-shaped blue decal along the side. The LED daytime running light signature is also quite different. They're all animated and they're very beautiful to look at. And this does have its own identity as compared to the Q8. It is one very long singular headlamp unit, whereas in the Q8 we have two separate elements. At the side, first of all, the wheels are available from 18 inches, but you can get the optional 20-inch rims and even up to 22 inches if you so prefer. We have 20-inch wheels, which look pretty nice and fill the wheel arch really well, but also give you sufficient amount of sidewall in the tire to give you a more comfortable plush ride. The suspension is also available in 3 different options. As standard, you get steel coilover springs, but you can get the optional air suspension. Then you can take it one step higher and get the adaptive air suspension with the anti-tilt function, wherein you have a split anti-roll bar, and suppose you're going around the left-hand corner, then the inside wheels will be pushed down, or rather, so the outside wheels will be pushed down, and then it will help prevent the car from leaning over too much. So a pretty useful feature to have for a big 2.2-ton SUV like this. But in terms of the design on the side, the main highlight is what they've done in this section over here. To kind of give the new Q7 a more SUV stance, they have this really interesting kink in the middle of the side skirt area. And this kink, as you can see over here and over here, is designed to visually lift the car and visually give the effect of having more ground clearance than it really does, along with this aluminum strip on the top. The rear axle can also be had with the rear axle steering, which means that at low speeds, the rear wheels turn in the opposite direction as the front wheels to effectively shorten the turning radius of the car, which is really useful when you want to maneuver this long vehicle in tight European city car parks at least. And also, the air suspension can raise and lower the car by a total of 9 centimeters, which is really useful when you want to go off-road and you don't want to scrape the bottom of the car on that, the nasty rocks and stuff like that. Here at the back, I think this the new Q7 has a good amalgamation of the previous version and the new, because from this angle, this area looks quite similar to the old version. Very Q7. It's very it has that identity instantly recognizable. But the tail lamps are quite slim now. They're also animated and cascading. I mean, the lights are a very big upgrade from the previous version with all the animations and the LED. Even the Q8 doesn't have the laser light, for example. Let's take a look inside the trunk. You get an automatic tailgate. The Q7 can be had with either 5 seats or 7 seats, and depending on the version you have, you get a lot of trunk space, from 865 liters all the way up to 2,050 liters. With the 7-seat configuration and the last row of seats up, there is not that much of space, but there is enough to fit a overhead cabin baggage, standard airline size, within this width itself, so you can have plenty of, at least a couple of them on the back. There are nice scuff plates here as well, also with a nice damped spring-loaded latch. So the small attention to detail is something that I always like in cars. The lip is also not that high, but another advantage of having the air suspension is that you can lower the SUV, as you can see right now. I can sit down to show you in more detail. It can be lowered, And in that way, it's easier to haul your items in. Of course, you can tumble the third row of seats automatically with these two switches on the side, and now you have a lot more space. It's also useful that they fold completely flat. You have a choice of petrol and diesel engine options. They're all 3-liter V6 turbocharged engines. The diesel starts with a 231 PS or metric horsepower version, and then also a 286 PS version like the one we have here. The TFSI, the turbo petrol V6 engine, makes 340 horsepower. They're all coupled with the 8-speed Tiptronic torque converter Autobox, and of course have the Audi Quattro system. First of all, because this is the TFSI, it has a 3-liter V6 turbo petrol engine, and you can see right away that both the intakes on the left and the right hand side of the bumper are actually functional, whereas in the diesel only one was functional and the other one was cosmetic. With the S-Line as well, you get a different shade of gray along the edges of the bumper to make it a little bit more athletic and a little bit more sporty. On the side as well, not much is different except a little S-Line badge. This car also is riding on 21-inch wheels with a little bit of a different design. Towards the back of the Q7 SUV, in this trim, you also have, for example, these exhaust pipes. First of all, they're fake, they're cosmetic, but unlike the one in the diesel, they do go inside a little bit. They're a little bit more concave, whereas the one on the diesel was just really a C-shaped cosmetic trim element. But apart from this, the S-Line, in this version that we have, is also riding on the Sport air suspension, which means that it's already a little bit lower. So the engine is a little bit different, the suspension is a little bit different, but the drivetrain and the chassis are quite similar. So the key fob is fairly standard. Of course, this has the keyless entry, so it's locked, you come close to it, the door unlocks automatically. You can also get a soft close function, so you can ensure that even if your kids are trying to close the door and they don't have enough force, the doors will always be secured. The door opens fairly wide. It is pretty hefty, so it gives you a good feeling of solidity. The materials are also very plush on the inside of the door. Soft materials on the top. Really nice finishing. Talking about the seats, you have 4 different options. The base actually comes with fabric, and I think that would also be a good option. You can be a little bit more kinder to animals and save a little bit of money, but you also get full leather seats, you get sports seats, and you can even get sports seats with integrated head restraints. And I really wouldn't recommend that. Just going by the stance of and the overall feeling of this car being more comfort oriented. Of course, if you have the SQ7 or the SQ8, that's a different story. But I think either the fabric seats are probably good enough. There's multiple ways of adjusting it. You can even get massaging seats, ventilated seats, and heated seats as well. The seating position is nice and tall, upright. Getting inside is also very easy, thanks to this being an SUV, of course. The seating position can be altered very easily thanks to this fully adjustable seat, as well as an adjustable steering column. 12.3 virtual cockpit, this 10.1-inch display. This is an option, you get a smaller one, but I think you should just go out and get this option because it's really useful. And down here you have a 8.6-inch touchscreen, and they work in harmony and they're really intuitive. I think so far this year, this system is one of my favorites. There's also a head-up display, and that gives you useful information such as the speed limit, the adaptive cruise assist, and navigation instructions, things like that. The steering wheel is fairly large, but it's not too large, so I think it's a pretty decent size. The main infotainment system is divided into 2 sections. So this upper section is the main command unit, where you have, for example, settings for your car, and a lot of other things up here, and you can go to navigation. You have this the very nice 3D view, but you can change it to, for example, 2D as well. You have the satellite view if you want. As default, this currently controls your climate control. Here as well, you can easily change the temperature. This also gets heated and ventilated seats. You also have seat massagers. So if you press the button on that on the seat, you can see here you can have different kinds of massage and intensity. So really advanced system. The seats are actually really comfortable. The middle seat also is not too bad because, as you can see, I have a very nice bench. The backrest is a little bit firm, and yes, you have a large central transmission tunnel which runs right in the middle. It's quite wide, but it's fairly low, so there is enough space to share with your co-passengers. So 3 adults, I think, are going to be quite comfortable. But the seats are also on individual railings or tracks, so you can slide each seat forward and backwards. Let's see how the back seat is, because, to be honest, unlike the X7, the Q7, the third row is a little bit tight. So the seat tumbles down and locks flat. There is a little switch over here, or a handle, which I can use to release, and it's also pneumatically charged, so it goes up on its own. Down here as well, there are switches to flip the rear seat or raise it. So getting access to the rear seat that way is fairly easy. There is a handle for me to use to step in, do a little bit of contortion to sit inside, and already this seat is way too back. So in the furthest back position, it is not possible for me to sit. I need to move this forward as well, because as you can see, the wheel arches from the rear wheels are coming in, so you're sitting a little bit inside compared to the middle row. But now let's put the seat down. So far so good. I have a tab here to lift the seat. This is too vertical, nobody would sit like this. A realistic angle of recline would be perhaps this. And I can fit here, you know. So 3 AJs can sit back to back in this SUV. Already I can tell you that in smaller cities or in narrow roads and these village situations, the Q7 doesn't really feel that big, and that's especially thanks to the rear axle steering. So I really recommend that if you're going to spend this much money on a big SUV, go the extra little bit distance and get that rear axle steering, because it really helps make the car a lot more maneuverable in tight situations and tight roads. This air suspension is also something I would recommend because it gives this car a really nice, plush, compliant magic carpet ride. On bumpy roads like that, it really soaks up the undulations and doesn't let any of that sharpness filter into the cabin. If you get the anti-tilt function as well, the anti-roll bars are separated, and that means that if you hit a pothole or a bump on one side of the car, that shock and that undulation isn't filtered, or it doesn't transmit to the other wheels of the car, so it maintains a very level ride. It also helps things like, tilting the car forward and backward under acceleration and braking, as well as controlling the body roll around corners. The Quattro is definitely useful, especially when you're going on muddy off-road tracks, because it helps with that traction. Yeah, I think the Quattro is a tried and tested system. But out here on the open road now, let's put it to the test. Let's put our foot down a little bit. The roads are really narrow here, and I'm driving a left-hand steering car on the left-hand side of the road, so it's a bit tricky. As you can see here now, we're coming up to a truck, and it does feel a little bit tight in some situations, so there's no getting away from the fact that it is a slightly larger SUV as well. But the engine, is really quiet now. You can barely hear it. But if you were to go into a lower gear, let's shift down using the paddle shifters, and if I put my foot down, you can hear it a little bit on the inside. It is a V6, so it doesn't sound terrible. It's a diesel, so it doesn't sound that great. So you're kind of stuck in the middle. But on the whole, with these paddle shifters, the 8-speed Tiptronic is, I would say, fairly responsive. It's not razor sharp, but at the same time, it's not trying to be. This is not even the S line version, or of course not the S7, so everything is tuned for comfort and long distance cruising. Has that big family feel because you can take 5 adults and 2 kids, perhaps not 7 adults, and it has that off-road, you know, the all-wheel drive and the off-road capability, thanks to that suspension which can raise itself and lower itself also, by the way, at higher speeds. So it gives you that kind of adventure feeling that I can take this SUV with my family anywhere, and that way I think it's a pretty good package. And if you're really looking for a big 7 adult seating luxury German SUV, then perhaps not. Maybe look elsewhere, perhaps like the BMW X7, but you have a lot of technology in this car, you have a lot of luxury, it's really quiet and comfortable. And when you want to push it a little bit, thanks to that active tilt control and rear axle steering, it is pretty fun, but it's not necessarily the enthusiast's choice. I found a nice serpentine road heading down into the coast, so let's kind of push it a little bit. Put it in dynamic mode, and I have the gearbox in the manual setting. I'll shift down and pass this little section here, and then we'll put our foot down. So the 0 to 100 is not necessarily something that's blistering, it's about 6.5 seconds, but I mean, because of that torquey diesel engine, there's always a lot of push. Even in the dynamic mode, you can't really hear the engine. There is no sound actuator, so that kind of sonorous engagement you don't really get with this diesel engine. The steering wheel does become heavier, but feedback is not, I wouldn't say, is not that sharp, so it is a little bit artificial, the weight, which I've said about this platform in the past, but at least the weight gives you that little bit of extra confidence in the handling. We wanted to show you guys another model. So this is the 55 TFSI. It has a 3-liter turbocharged V6 petrol engine, which makes 340 horsepower and 500 Newton meters of torque. This 500 Newton meters of torque comes in really low down in the RPM, just a little bit over 1,500, and it stays steady for quite a lot more after that. So it's pretty torquey engine low down, even though it's a petrol. This car also has the S-Line package. So even there, several things are different than the previous version that we were driving. Like, for example, the steering wheel is the S-Sport S-Line steering wheel with a flat bottom and a little bit different grip. And this also has the adaptive air suspension Sport. So in this, the suspension is already lower a little bit, and of course it also has the active roll stabilization, all-wheel steering, and the Quattro, of course, coupled with a 8-speed Tiptronic torque converter auto box. So primarily the engine is a little bit different in the powertrain, the suspension and chassis and the drivetrain are pretty much similar. And of course some cosmetic elements on the outside. So let's put it through the paces. We're on this beautiful coast road here in Ireland. I'm going to go into the drive select mode and then go to dynamic. Shift down. There's plenty of torque and it really pushes the car forward. Acceleration is definitely brisk, but it's not blistering. The transmission shifts down pretty quickly as well. Steering actually is also much heavier now. It gives you good confidence when you're going around tighter corners. The suspension is also a little bit stiffer. You might hear my voice quivering a little bit because of that. But the engine doesn't necessarily sound much nicer. There is not a sound actuator, so it doesn't really become more sonorous. It just, you can hear it revving a little bit higher, and I wouldn't say it sounds that great. It doesn't really sound that sporty. But still, I think the body control with this active roll stabilization really makes you feel like this car is a lot smaller than it is, because with that four-wheel steering as well, the back rotates around you, and it really makes the car feel a lot more agile and really masks that weight. If you're driving briskly with a heavy foot, this engine is going to be a lot less efficient, of course a lot less efficient generally than the diesel engine. Right now it's saying we're getting about 12 liters for 100 kilometers. I haven't been driving too much and I haven't really been driving on the highway, so it is a little bit on the higher side, but I wouldn't expect it to be much lower than this, especially if you're driving a little bit more enthusiastically. It's going to definitely be over 10, perhaps around 11. But I must say, with the nice visibility, this upright seating position, if you want to have a little bit more fun, this version, the 55 TFSI with the turbo petrol, is definitely more for the enthusiast than the diesel engine is. And that brings us to the end of today's episode. I hope you guys enjoyed watching this film. I enjoyed making it. Ireland is fantastic. I mean, look at this fantastic landscape. So, what do I think about the new Audi Q7? Well, with prices starting at around 67,000 euros for the 235 horsepower TDI, the diesel engine, then if you get the more powerful 286 horsepower diesel engine, then you're looking at something around 75,000 euros. And here for the Matador Red 55 TFSI, the turbo petrol V6 engine, you're looking at something around 80,000 euros. With the S-Line package, the upgraded lights, bigger wheels, and all the extra technology and sunroof, if you keep adding the options, you're easily going to cross 90,000 euros. And for that price, yes, it is a little bit steep, but keep in mind this is the Audi Q7. It's one of the flagship SUVs that Audi makes. So if you consider the platform, the chassis, the technology, all that really advanced driver assistance systems, which I really like, I think it's, one can argue that it's not that expensive or it's worth the money, and I don't think it's too bad at all. So at the end of the day, I think the technology is great, but if you want a real 7-seat family SUV, perhaps this is not going to meet your requirements. The last row is really tight for adults and is only really suitable for short journeys or for kids. Thankfully, at least, it has ISOFIX points so you can fit child seats in the third row, but if you want a proper 7-seat adult 7-seater, then you're probably better off with the BMW X7. Between the diesel and the petrol engine, there is quite a lot of difference. I think the petrol is a little bit more sprightly. None of them really sound that great on the inside, unfortunately, but the petrol is a little bit more free revving, a little bit more responsive, and hence, with that anti-roll function and the rear wheel steering, the car feels pretty entertaining nevertheless. So there's a little bit for everybody. That's my verdict. Let me know what you guys think. Put it down in the comments below. Subscribe if you're new here, and I'll see you guys next time.